Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. Who is Al Haymon? So you hear his name thrown around a lot. He has over 40 signature fighters to his over 200-man roster. And Al Haymon is just this figure that almost seems mystic in nature. Sam Watson is often mistaken for Al Haymon, which now a lot of people realize that Sam Watson is not Al Haymon, but it's because you always see Sam Watson at the fights. He attends a lot of press conferences along with Leonard Ellerbe, and you just don't see Al Haymon. But Al Haymon was a younger brother of a fellow named Bobby Haymon, who was a top contender as a welterweight. But Al Haymon he's a unique figure in that he didn't just fumble his way into boxing. He's a very intelligent man. Made his way to Harvard, studying economics, ended up going all the way, getting a master's degree there. Took part of his school loan when he was at Harvard to start promoting music. Long story short, he's worked with some of the best, from Hammer, the OJs, even considered as blood by Gerald Levert's father. So he's even worked with Mary J. Blige and a myriad of other entertainers. But long story short, Al Haymon ended up getting involved in boxing, becoming the manager of Vernon Forrest. And since then, he's gotten even more immersed in boxing, managing the likes of Floyd Mayweather, Marcos Maidana, even touching base with Pacquiao, and some of the biggest names the Earl Spencers, the Keith Thurmans, the Danny Garcias, even Paulie Malignaggi and other fighters. But the thing about Al Haymon, right, there's some promoters support him because a lot of people feel that he's in violation of the Muhammad Ali Act, which was a provision to protect fighters from being exploited, because there's the manager, who should have the best interest of the fighter, and then the promoter, who has the best interest of himself. And with Al Haymon, people feel that he's both the manager and promoter, which I believe he is too. But it works for him, okay? Now, Lou DiBella has gone on record and said that if you look at the laws and you look at the rules, he said there were certain things that he was trying to do when HBO disbanded its boxing platform, and he said he felt that he should have been allowed to manage fighters and promote, and he didn't understand why it wasn't permissible. And he said the one thing about Al Haymon, if we're going to be so concerned about him violating the Muhammad Ali Act and exploiting fighters, he said I don't see or hear any fighters complaining about Al Haymon exploiting them. He said, if anything, they love Al Haymon, and many of them felt that had Al Haymon been in their life early in their boxing careers, they would have been multimillionaires and even billionaires, in particular Floyd's case. And he says, so when you look at Al Haymon and what he's doing, Lou DiBella came to his support. Now, there are other promoters who, take jabs at him, and that's okay, in particular Bob Arum, Golden Boy. But what Al Haymon has been able to do, right, is he sits back in this control center, and he's calling all the shots. So he's behind the scenes, but he has these different faces that are out there and doing the work. So he's delegating the authority to get things done, but he's not delegating the responsibility, because Al Haymon is a serious micromanager, and he's all about his business and being very successful. And there's nothing wrong with that, because he's a brilliant man. And even if people feel he's violating the Muhammad Ali Act, it's their fault for allowing loopholes. I remember when Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were having this huge debate about him and his taxes and Donald Trump not paying a penny in so many years, and he's a billionaire. And then he came back at Hillary Clinton and was like, well, you're the one who wrote the laws. And I'm just following the laws. I didn't break any laws, and you're the one who wrote them. And she just sat there and had this big, Kool-Aid smile on her face out of embarrassment. And I say that to say this. If there are loopholes in laws, if there are loopholes in regulations, if there are gray areas, right, you can't fault a man like Al Haymon with a brilliant mind to get a step ahead of all the lawmakers and come up with the title of an advisor. When really, that's just a BS title. He's a promoter and a manager. And you say, well, no, he's not a promoter. The man is a promoter. PBC and all those fighters and expanding over into Europe and trying to get PBC out there on the networks, which I believe he's done that successfully. He's doing that so he can promote his fighters and get them exposure. But the reason why it works for Al Haymon is because he's not trying to take advantage of anyone. Everyone loves Al Haymon. Now, there are some fighters who may complain a bit because maybe they're not fighting as often as they would like. And, it's hard to have a stable of over 200 fighters and to get them all, 2, 3, 4 fights a year. It's just very difficult. And you look over what's going on in the UFC, where, they have over 700-something fighters from all over the world, supposed to be guaranteed at least 3 fights a year. And sometimes they're not, some of these fighters only getting 1 fight. And it's just damn near impossible to have 3 fights a year and you have a 700-plus man roster. So with Al Haymon, that may be the only one drawback that I would say I've heard is that it's sometimes all of his fighters aren't getting as many fights a year as they feel that they would like. But when you look at Al Haymon and what he's doing as a manager, some people say, well, why in the world people love him so much? How do they feel that they would be so much further ahead financially had they started working with Al years ago? Well, we can just start by looking at, fight purses and how much Al Haymon takes. Al Haymon takes 10 to 15% of their purse. Most managers, promoters, so this is the thing, right? Manager Al Haymon is the promoter and the manager. Most boxers that have a promoter, the promoter could take between 20 and 40%. The manager could be 25% or more. Okay? They get hit over the head twice by the promoter and the manager. And sometimes the numbers can be less. Maybe let's say it's 15% for the manager, 20% for the promoter. That's still 30%. Okay? With Al Haymon as the advisor, but really serving as a promoter and manager, he charges a flat fee of 10 to 15%. You understand now? So he's doing the promoter and manager job, but he's only charging really for one of those roles, and he's charging for the role that takes the least amount, and he's taking less than what the going rate is. So a fighter who, let's say just like a $10,000 purse, he's got to give, let's say 40%, let's just say 20% of that, right? 2 G's has to go to his promoter. Another 10 G's has to go, another $1,000, 10% has to go to his manager. That right there is 3,000 out of the 7 already. With Al Haymon, it's just a flat rate, 10 to 15%, so 1,000 to 1,500. That's a difference of $1,500 in that fighter's pocket. Okay? Still had to deal with taxes and everything else. But it just shows you the reason why so many fighters love him. Now, we're talking about guys getting paid $1, $2, $3, $4 million. That's a lot of money in their pocket. Matter of fact, there's so much money being left behind that, probably 20% of that, which would normally go to a promoter or to a manager, now they can use that for their taxes, so they still have more money in their pocket. And that's the difference with Al Haymon and everyone else. Is Al Haymon is definitely all about his fighters. He is a promoter and he is a manager, but it's all masked under the title advisor, and it's legal. And Al Haymon is taking care of his guys, Now, trust me, if Al Haymon was doing something wrong to fighters, there's one fighter in particular who would be blabbing his mouth because he was signed to Al Haymon. And he loved Al Haymon. And this fighter in particular, he's retired now. We all know he has he doesn't even know when to shut up. He talks so much he's gotten himself in trouble. And he still keeps talking like he doesn't know. He just doesn't, his skin is tight. We call that tight skin. When your mouth is always open, it means your skin's tight. It just draws back in. You can't close your mouth. That's Paulie Malignaggi. Paulie Malignaggi came out and said he has no complaints. He loves the way Al treats him. He was actually laughing about it. Almost like just that cynical laughing his way all the way to the bank type of laugh. And if Paulie Malignaggi, who we know will say anything, doesn't matter to Paulie, we know Paulie will say anything. And if Paulie is speaking so highly of him, then I really tend to believe what everyone else is saying. Because a guy like Paulie, who will jeopardize his position as a broadcast broadcasting analyst, will talk about, racial issues and talk about who he thinks is cheating and talk about corruption in boxing. Those things that, with a guy like that in those positions, he probably should have those conversations probably behind closed doors with friends or family or whoever it is, but nothing should get recorded and make it to the media. But Paulie has a big mouth. So believe me, if there was something foul going on with Al Haymon, Paulie Malignaggi would have said something a long time ago. But he didn't. Even he speaks highly of him. So when it comes to Al Haymon, the reason I did this video, because there's been some back and forth between myself, guys in the comments, and a buddy of mine who lives around the corner who watches a lot of boxing. And they keep telling me that he's not a promoter. He's an advisor. I'm like, he's all the above, man. He's a promoter, manager, advisor. He's all the above. But the title advisor is just to keep him out of hot water. And I don't think he'll ever get in hot water because they can't prove anything, because there's nothing saying he can't be a person who advises on promoting and advises on managing. That's another reason why so many of his fighters have their own promotional companies. It's not that they know what the hell they're doing. It's like, hey, go out there, form your little LLC, and this is how it needs to be structured, and then we're going to do business through that. So I'll guide you through that. And Al Haymon is making money hand over fist. And it is what it is. So for all the people squawking about everything that Al Haymon is doing wrong, I just don't see much of an issue. I honestly don't. We talk about the Ali Act, it's supposed to protect fighters. And, a lot of the laws governing boxing are designed to avoid the exploitation of fighters. And you just don't hear any fighters, not even one, in the boxing industry allege that Al Haymon is doing anything bad to fighters or exploiting fighters. And when you really look at like the Charlos, Spencers, the Mayweather, even when Pacquiao was over there, any fighter on the roster, you can't really think of anyone that has, where there's a manager that's more loyal to the fighters than Al Haymon. Eddie Hearn, he'll take care of you if you're with him. But Eddie Hearn is about his money. Al Haymon is a little bit different. But you got to understand, Al Haymon came into the business as a millionaire. Real money. He had plenty of money, very successful. And he was a promoter. Although it was in entertainment, that skill set, promoting is promoting. Okay? And he came over here and he did it extremely well. He learned the business, he figured it out, and he's done extremely well. So one thing I do know for a fact when it comes to him is he's definitely not easy to negotiate with, and that's what it is. He's not going to play around when it comes to his business and when it comes to his fighters. And he's going to try to get his fighters the most money with the least amount of risk. And that's why you see PBC fighters fighting PBC fighters. He's going to keep the money in-house. He's going to do it smart. And he built up the stable. He has a lot of fighters in the same weight classes that have names, and he's pitting them against each other. And if he's going to take a fighter and put him against somebody outside of his stable, it's going to have to be worth it. And when I say worth it, it's going to have to be real money. huge money, because Al Haymon is all about taking care of his fighters. So people, that's my 2 cents on Al Haymon. I could have got more into the extent of him being a music promoter and stuff like that. I'm not doing that. You can go read on that. But I do want to just draw attention to this argument about whether he is a promoter or he's a manager or he's an advisor, or all the above. Look, he's all the above. And it's perfectly legal because he found a gray area to skirt the laws and skirt the regulations and give himself this advisor title. And you know what? I'm glad that you have a guy like him in boxing, because you look at any of these fighters that he's been dealing with and how successful they've done financially. And you have to attribute all of that to this man. And I just say to Al Haymon, job well done. You can say sometimes they make crappy matches, but you know what? Some of those matches that some people may find crappy, is putting real money in those fighters' pockets. And that's all due to this man, Al Haymon. But anyway, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Appreciate your support. Shout out to all the veterans. And I'm in the breeze.